Wheatley, and welcome to episode 108 of the Wheatley podcast. Thanks very much for coming on to YouTube if you are here. If you're not, that's all right. If you're on the podcast platforms, I think I always say this every week, and I'm never really sure about with regards to the platforms, the podcast platforms, if I could say it, about liking and all that kind of stuff. I don't know how it works. I know it works on YouTube and all that, obviously, but thanks as always. I want to thank Robert Ford for coming on last week, an old school friend from up in Dublin. Robert was very kind to come on and talk about being a stand-up comedian, being a motivational speaker. He was very honest about his illness that he had when we were in school together, and how he lost his sight, and how he kind of turns what people would see as a disability into an ability. And obviously Robert's really cool, but for him to come on and be as open as he was brilliant. So thanks for that, Robert, if you're listening. Let's get into this week's guest. I've trying to write an introduction for you, Rebecca. So I'm going to say this. Rebecca is a wellness blogger and the host of the Invisible to Invincible podcast. Rebecca, how are you doing?
I'm well, thank you.
Thank you very much for coming on. I wanted to ask, actually, because we're recording this a few days before it comes out. Are you in the middle of two storms over there?
Yes, I'm waiting for the next one with bated breath.
We had I don't know what it was called over in England. It was called Diarmid here, which is the Irish for Dermot, which isn't a very threatening sounding name for a storm. I think tomorrow's, funny enough, is Eunice, which again doesn't appear to be a very threatening. But
no,
yeah, but we are waiting as well for it to come along. But it's kind of like, I don't know. Some people love that weather when they can kind of hunch down and get under the duvet and watch a film or something like that. So I don't know. Yeah, our house gets rattled. We're out in the country on a farm, and it just gets absolutely rattled by the wind and the rain as well. But again, sure, if the fire's lit, it's all good, Rebecca, we always start with the first question being, could you give us a short or a long history of your upbringing, please?
Yes, it is very long and complicated, so I will try and squidge as much down as I can.
Okay.
I grew up I was in a very privileged upbringing financially, but something I sort of had to learn the hard way is that money isn't everything. And I think sometimes people outside of my story, often it's the first thing they see and they can't see anything else other than, well, you had wealth, so everything must have been perfect. Quite the opposite. I was sexually abused as a child. I suffered sexual abuse as a teenager, and I was raped when I was 17 as well. So I had a full load of that. I had anorexia. My best friend at school died of cancer when I was 17, but she'd been going with that for 5 years. My sister grew up in a mental hospital. I lived on my own for 5 years of my teenage years. I'm sure I'm missing bits out, but it was not an easy ride at all, as well as sort of growing up and having to deal with your exams and finding out how to talk to boys, and everything was just very complicated. And then it didn't really get that much better after I sort of left school. Either I got into sort of alcohol and partying and behaving badly to the point where I got myself into some serious trouble. Not with law at all, but with sort of, I'm very good at self-sabotaging when that's sort of my pain method. That's how I punish myself, is self-sabotage. So that was kind of my style, and it got really dangerous. And there were many times where I sort of really risked my life doing sort of behaviors that weren't okay, really. And after I left school, I lost then the grief that I felt from my best friend. I sort of then had repeated. My ex, who was abusive, I was with him for 4 years, and with that now sounds appropriate. His mum, who I was really close to, died suddenly on his birthday at 5 a.m, which was really traumatic. And my dog, who was 10 months old, went in for a neuter. She died suddenly the next day, and they'd apparently done the operation wrong, and it was their mistake, and it was just a huge amount to have to deal with. I got cervical cancer. I also have PCOS, endometriosis, ADHD, dissociative identity disorder, loads of chronic illnesses that to me are related to trauma, and I understand a lot of that. I'm not sort of that vengeful towards it, because I know it's just my body's way of processing stuff. And I'm sure I've missed loads of bits out, but that is an overview of my main traumas.
Okay, but Rebecca, like we're obviously going to talk a lot about this and get into a lot of it. And the great thing about you, obviously, I found you on Instagram. The great thing about you is like your honesty and your openness about it, and how you I don't know if anybody, because obviously I can't relate to what you went through, if anything I can relate to, it's the mental health side of things and the, the different types. I'm bipolar too, and I've got an anxiety disorder. And I think, and we just mentioned it before we came on there about that whole thing about the way we share it with other people and how other people can take something from it. And it's not, I know I can speak for myself, obviously, when I'm talking about, it's not the reward is not me. Oh, I'm sharing this to get a reward back, but there is a reward in doing it for your own mental health and the boost that you get from it. Well, at least that's what I found. And obviously, this question is kind of redundant now because of what you've just told us. But at least in the sense of like when you first became of mental health, was it because of your sister growing up where she did, or was it because of what you went through?
Yeah, so I had depression actually before she did,
Okay.
when I was a teenager, sort of for a year pretty badly. And then I've been in, I guess, bouts of it since then that weren't as severe. And then anxiety has been with me since birth. And unfortunately, with all the trauma, sort of gradually got worse until last year when I was at breaking point and sort of had a nervous breakdown, basically. And luckily I got the help, and I have antidepressants now, which was for my anxiety. And it's been life-changing for me, really life-changing. But I very much feel like I know depression and anxiety very, very well. I feel like, it's that visitor, that awkward guest that just comes and stays at your house and you can never get to leave. And I'm just like, oh yeah, I know that one. I know them so well.
When you were given medication, were you reluctant to it at the start, or was it something that you thought, well, this is going to help me regardless, so I'm going to take it?
So I think I knew I needed medication for probably 3 or 4 years before I said, yeah, I'll need to go on it. I didn't want to, because my sort of what I always wanted to do was being in the army. I don't know, it was just like, I just loved the sort of control of it, really. I needed someone to hold me down, and I thought that was the army. But they're super strict on your mental health history. So I was like, oh, if I don't have anything on my record, then there won't be any problems. So I applied to the reserves again 2020, and unfortunately, because I've now got diagnosed with all my hormone conditions, I've got PCOS. It's a called like imbalance of your hormones. Like, it has quite severe side effects at times. I wouldn't be allowed in anyway. So I sort of got to the point where I was like, oh, fuck, it doesn't matter anyway, does it? Like, there's no way I can get in. And so when it came to it last year, I think before then it'd been a matter of, oh, I'm not bad enough, I don't need it enough. And then when it got to it last year, I was like, I will take anything to make this pain go away, to make this feeling better. So yeah, that's where I got to in that.
Yeah, look, I probably agree with that, in the sense that when I was first given it, I was very, actually, the first time I was given it, I was reluctant, but it was kind of a surprise that I was diagnosed as someone who was experiencing this, like signs of depression, I guess. And then a few years down the line, it was the case of, oh, well, I have to take it because it'll make me better, Where do you find where do you find the confidence to talk so openly about mental health?
I think because I kept so much of my life so secret throughout my teen years. Nobody knew about my situation at home. Nobody knew about my trauma. No, I didn't tell anyone I was raped for probably a year after that happened. I think I kept so much of it secret, and I realized, like, what good is that doing for me or for anybody else? And as soon as I started to speak up, I started to get help, and it helped me speaking up. I don't really know. I've always written. I've always been crazy into writing. It's always how I've sort of got my feelings out. And then sort of getting, social media for me, the Instagram account has been so rewarding for me, just seeing how many people message me saying this has really helped, and I feel comfortable to speak about this now. And I don't set out to do that. I set out purely selfish mission to say, this is how I'm feeling right now, and it's going to help me to talk to you guys about it. But it comes with so many rewards. And I guess it's sort of like, from that, I just keep getting more honest, sometimes too honest.
You know, it's I don't know if you can be too honest about it, because you're as honest as you want to be, you know, and if that makes any sense. And I think when I look at your posts, when you talk about a lot of, obviously, a lot of different things, but in particular when it comes to mental health and things like that, you talk so much about you know, how certain days you're down, and people have to see that as well, I think, you know. And I did an episode where I was going through you know, one of the bipolar lows, and you know, I was reluctant to do it at the start. I was kind of thinking, like, nobody needs to hear me talking like that, or talking about things like that. They want people to come on and be positive, and we'll talk about like what helps us with mental health. But I think you have to see the lows, and you have to be honest with the people who are tuning in or looking at your Instagram page. Now, I think that's a huge part of it.
Yeah.
You know, I had a breakdown back in 2008, 2009. I can never remember the year for some reason, but I think you know, it was almost like starting again, like rebooting the computer or something like that. And I learned so much from it. What do you think you've learned from your breakdown?
I completely relate to that phrase. I sort of got on the medication, and I had a reaction at first, which you can do, where it sort of made the anxiety worse. And it took 6 weeks for it to start working, and I had sort of benzodiazepines to really get me through. And I quit my job. I changed my diet again, and completely stripped back my life to where I was like, what am I doing? It's like I was working a corporate job in recruitment, and it was just not for me. I've been very good at sort of having 3, 4, 5, 6 jobs at a time, because I need the stimulation, which is all well and good, but not when you need also time out to deal with, you know, existing with having so much trauma in you anyways is tough. But with any mental health condition, to have a full-time job on the top of that is just, it's almost impossible. You know, I think it's amazing that people managed. Well, I don't know if they do manage to do it. It's challenging. So yeah, I really stripped back everything in my life, and sort of have taken a very much more, because at the same time I did my yoga course at the same time I was going through all of it. And I just reconnected with my body, and I started listening a lot more to my body, which I think I could hear before, but I was ignoring. And now I don't ignore. I'm like, no. So yesterday, I needed to leave work. I need to see a doctor pretty quickly, got it done, and I've taken a few days off, and that's what I need. And I've listened to myself, whereas I didn't do that before at all. I just kept going.
Yeah, I think I think you're very proactive in things. It's like, you know, you just mentioned your diet there, and it kind of changed your diet. But you know, with your health concerns and what you talk about, you're looking for the change, or looking for, you know, what it is the best for it. And I think a lot of people get in a slump, like, and they just decide, this is what you know, you could sit there and feel sorry for yourself and think, I'm not going to get anywhere from here. This is just the way it is, you know, and that's it. But from following you, you've noticed that you're always pushing forward, try to improve things, because I'm sure, you know, like, getting in that slump, it's so hard to get out of it.
Yeah, so it's interesting you say that, because I think as well, like, people don't see my slumps as much. Like, I do absolutely have them, just like everybody else. Last year, one of my traumas, I forgot, had a miscarriage, and I had COVID, which led to me losing my lungs, which then led to my mental breakdown. I couldn't really breathe either. It was really, really tough. And I ended up spending from September to the end of December in my slump. But rather than approaching it as, this is a slump, I'm unmotivated, I'm a failure, I went, do you know what? I've been through a hell of a lot this year. I'm going to give my body as much time as it needs. I ate what I wanted. And when I say I ate what I wanted, within my new sort of strict plan of not eating gluten, because it reacts to me, and now I've got a new one, it's complicated. I sat and binge watched Netflix, and I got home and I didn't do anything in the evenings. I was like, I'm healing. This isn't a slump for me. I'm healing, and my body needs this time to breathe. And then once it was ready, I was like, oh, actually, I want to do that course. I want to start my business. And I just let myself be ready. And it's probably the first time I've sort of approached it as like graciously as I did, I think.
I'm glad you mentioned that as well, because it's another thing we've touched on this podcast about allowing the time to heal. That's just such an important thing, because it's not like you have to be going 100 miles per hour, and it's not always going to work, because especially if you're going through some difficulties with your mental health, it's okay to kind of binge watch, Netflix, or watch a few films, whatever it might be. I think that's hugely important that people have to remember. And it's like what you said, Rebecca, about listening to your body. It's sometimes like, if you're like, for example, if you're in the gym and training too much, and your muscles start to get pulled and all that kind of things, you're supposed to say, okay, I'm going to rest it. So the brain is the same thing, and the mind is the same thing. Rebecca, just allow me to read out an advert, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
It's mucky business, but you know what I mean? Somebody's got to do it, I suppose. So I'll try and get it right. Fusion Training Centre, Monksland Athlone, a place to train in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, kickboxing, martial arts and CrossFit. Great atmosphere with experienced coaches and a real sense of community. If you want to join the team, find us at Facebook at Fusion Training Centre, or drop in for a chat. Fusion Training Centre, train like a warrior. I've got my jumper on, my hoodie on as well, just to represent fully. Anyway, so Rebecca, why did you decide to start your podcast?
I just thought I've got so much to talk about. Where I'm at, this is the thing with me. I have these phases, like an ADHD thing. I'll go through real waves of, I've got so much energy, I don't know what to do with it, and I have no energy and I don't know how to deal with that. And I have high energy phases. I need to create, and sometimes it's not enough. And I'm like, right, how can I? So sort of 2020, when we had lockdown, I was working part-time and getting payment from the other business that I did. I had TikTok, I had Instagram, I had YouTube going, I had the podcast going. I went nuts with it because I had the energy, the motivation to, and it was like my favorite year of my life. I had the best time, and I was single, and I was just so happy, and going through loads of stuff and learning as well. So yeah, and I just sort of got on a real roll with it. And then I found myself going, oh no, I haven't got the energy. So I had to take a bit of a break. So I took, I think, a year off, and then I've sort of started up again now. And I'm just testing the waters with my energy at the moment. And I'm just like I said before, just allowing myself to listen to my body and see where I'm at, because I feel like I'm on the up, but that up doesn't necessarily mean we're straight up. It means, we're going to have ups and downs and lows on the way up,
Yeah, you were very clever not to put weekly in the title like I did, because that means I have to do it weekly. But I do actually love the title Invisible to Invincible. And I think, like, did you ever feel invisible?
Yeah, I think because I grew up, again, not telling anybody my story, not what was going on at home or what I'd been through. And I lived on my own from 13 to 17, 18. I felt like no one could see me. And at school, I was sort of a geek with glasses and braces and plaits, and I was really quiet. And then until I turned 17, when I was like, fuck this, and just went nuts. And everybody saw me. And if they didn't see me, then they needed to see me. And it was a big deal. And I guess now I feel like the difference is, I think, especially with social situations, nothing, I don't like, even about coming on this podcast, it doesn't frighten me. Like, nothing concerns me. I don't get embarrassed, I don't think, like perhaps I probably was back then. My confidence level is so different. And I think that's the invincible aspect, is the confidence you can have in yourself. It's not about creating things or being big or being something or being, whoever, or earning loads of money. It's having the confidence to believe in yourself enough not to be ashamed of just being a human.
I've listened to a number of episodes, and I found the ones about, and this kind of, I guess this makes sense, because when you were maybe talking about it, you were single. So you talked about like dating, and there was one in particular where you talked about new relationships and kind of the anxiety that goes along with it, and with regards to mental health. And I can kind of vouch for that is as when I like go into a new relationship or start dating someone, I guess the better way to put it. There's an awful lot of emotions that kind of come on, and I tend to do kind of push people away then, because it's too much to, rather than kind of deal with what's going on inside of myself, I deal with the external factor. What did you kind of, you probably recorded a while ago now, but what did you kind of learn from that episode?
I think because I had sort of gone through that period, and I was talking to somebody on Instagram who was going through it at the time, and I thought, God, I can really relate to this. Let's sort of, I'll gather all my information and throw it back. I think because I'd had sort of probably quite a few startups of relationships and things before, I said I was going to go into the one I'm in now differently. And when I was feeling that anxiety, was going to respect myself enough to make sure I wasn't becoming codependent, because I don't know where your anxiety takes you. It sounds like you sort of do the opposite, and you're either it's to do with attachment type on how you react to this kind of interaction, but you're either going to try and get really close to somebody or push them away. It's based on, I can't think of the words right now, but it's your attachment style. And mine was codependent. So when I felt these feelings of, I don't want to let them go because no one else is going to be here. Yeah. I was like, oh, hang on. It's nothing to do with them. It's to do with me and my insecurities. And I'd say, look, I had a really great weekend. I'm going to take a few days to myself just to make sure I'm grounded, I'm stable, making sure I'm going out, taking myself on dates, do that all the time, to the cinema, to the park, to get a meal by myself. I'm very, very independent in that sense. And I think it's very important to connect with yourself in that sense. And I guess that feeling of when you want to push away, in your case, it's asking, why am I doing this? What am I afraid of? What do I think I'm going to gain from pushing them away? And sort of listening to what you really need. Because there's, this is what I should do. But then there's like, hang on, if this is too much for me, why would I put myself in that traumatic situation if that isn't, and it doesn't necessarily mean, the relationship's quits. It just means you need to be with somebody who's understanding enough to say, yeah, it's fine if you need to take a few days yourself. I'm not going to take it personally. And it's about finding somebody who is secure enough in themselves to deal with your insecurities, which is a real challenge in this world, because a lot of us have stuff going on.
Yeah, I like, you're right. It's that idea of pushing someone away and then immediately saying to myself, right, I'm done now. I'll never be in a relationship because it's so much hassle. And then it goes back. It's like a vicious circle or whatever. But it was a fascinating episode. You also did one which I found very interesting, to do with the dating apps, because I think it's the funny thing about dating apps is, like, every person you talk to on a dating app thinks the app is terrible and they hate being on there. And it's a weird world of, like, it being a necessity for some people, but also being a hindrance in their lives, that, people only say one sentence and all that. It is kind of, I mean, I can see the reason for them, and I've met some lovely people off dating apps. Like, I don't really have that much bad things to say about it, but I can understand why people may be gonna get hung up with it. You did an episode on it. Thankfully, you don't need them anymore. But how do you feel about dating apps?
It's emotional gambling. That's what dating apps are, because you are putting yourself out there to be hurt. Yeah. Not necessarily by it. All it can take is someone to not match with you think is absolutely perfect, and you've thought about them for all, I remember it so clearly, someone I got really caught up on who didn't match with me, and it bothered me for the whole weekend. I was really upset about it. I was like, he was the one. Yeah. So I was, that was just a state of mind I was in at the time. Turns out he had just started dating and got into an early relationship. I found this through stalking on his Instagram later. This is, absolutely not going to deny anything. And it was nothing to do with me. It wasn't personal at all. And I think I was like, it sort of changed my approach to it a little bit in terms of, and in general, it's not personal, having a non-personal approach. I think because it is emotional gambling, you really have to be in a place where you've got the emotion to give. Yeah. If you want to do the gambling, you have to. I take myself off it all the time. I'd go through phases of being on it and off it and on and off it, because it was getting me down. And I'd be like, no, I'm ready. I'm back on. Because when you win on there, when you win on Tinder or whatever, then you win big. Someone's paying attention to me, someone likes me, someone wants to meet up with me. And you feel that emotional rush. And it really does feel like the addiction that you get with alcohol, or sort of with sex, or anything that you can get addicted to, even with food, that sort of guilty pleasure. Like, I know I shouldn't be doing it. I know this is bad for me, but at the same time, it is a bit addictive. So I guess it really depends where, because at the same time, isn't it? I think it's something like 80% of couples nowadays meet on Tinder, something like that. So it's like, what do you do here? You either accept that perhaps I'm not going to meet someone. Am I happy being on my own to that and not giving myself the chance of meeting somebody, or I'm going to go on this app, but I need to make sure I'm in the emotional place where I'm able to give that, I'm able to lose.
Yeah, sometimes you look at it, you talk about that addiction, but you look at the numbers, like the people who want to meet you, or it depends, the language depends on what app you're on, but you're like, 30 people want to meet me. I'm like, great, like, and it's like, but when you boil it down to the basics of it, that person literally doing this, and they could be paying 100% attention. They could be, really concentrating on a film and just doing this, and it's that idea of you're hanging on to these numbers and hanging on to, these people might like me, and that's another thing that does happen an awful lot. What you mentioned just there about like, I really like that person. Why did they do this? And you don't know. It's this type thing. But yeah, you can always stalk them on Instagram, Facebook. It's that's always the option is there for. Do you have a particular favorite episode that you did on your podcast?
Ooh, that is a good question. I actually really liked the one I did recently on health anxiety, managing health anxiety. Just because it was quite fresh and I'd sort of lived through that and had the advice to give, I think, as well as it's just sort of anecdotal in terms of people who can understand what I needed when I was going through that was for somebody else to say, yeah, me too, that's exactly how I feel. And I couldn't find it. All I could find was the people on the drug I take, the antidepressant I take has like a reviews website. It's the only place I found people who were experiencing what I was experiencing. And I was on there every day because I was like, oh, it gave me so much relief hearing that. I didn't know what was wrong with me. I thought it was health anxiety makes you think it is your health when it's actually your mental health, your anxiety. I just needed someone to tell me that was what was going on. And it was just, I think probably I feel quite good about that podcast, but there's loads of them that I've finished up and that was really good. I was really happy with that one.
I think I listened to that one too, actually. And it was interesting to me because it's a different type of anxiety, but what you mentioned there about the idea that I look back at like 2008, 2009, and I think like none of this was around. Like there wasn't the podcast talking about the stuff. There wasn't like yourself doing your Instagram page. There was none of that around. And it was very, I'm so grateful of it now because I can kind of, I still learn every day about mental health and how to kind of make my own mental health better. But I'm sad it wasn't around then, because it was, you were dealing with I was obviously dealing with the doctors and the hospitals and things like that. And I have my parents, thankfully, but it was very new and I couldn't, it's similar to what you're saying there about turning to the website for the drug. It was like, I'm not even sure then I could have found that, that kind of facility anywhere. So it's such a weird thing and a really positive thing, I guess, that now we can just have a person we've never met on Instagram giving us the information of how they're getting through things. And that goes back to what we were talking about at the start. People putting it out there. It's such a valuable resource. So I think like one thing about, well, I've said one thing about your Instagram page too many times now. The fourth thing about your, but vulnerability, because that you kind of touched on already about being there when it's positive and everything's going well, and the nice message and stuff. Vulnerability is very difficult in the public eye, and you've got quite a popular Instagram page. Like, does anxiety come into play there when you're thinking about like hitting that kind of share button?
Honestly, the only times is when I'm worried, or have I been a bit too controversial?
Okay.
But I can hand on heart tell you, I haven't received like any hate, especially not for last year. I think it's amazing in that sense, but I have a 50% male, 50% female audience. I stretch across all areas in terms of people who reach out to me and who talk to me. And I think the people who follow me for sort of the fitnessy, oh look, she's really pretty and doing yoga-y things, also benefit from that. Oh, when she's talking about mental health, and I really needed someone to say that right now. And there's where I think I do have that crossover, and it's like a really unique little mix. And I don't really know what niche I'm in, but I quite like that. And I guess something I'm definitely doing a lot more of recently is showing my on stories showing sort of I get quite bad acne, just showing my bare skin, and I haven't got any hate from that. I've only got really positive things. Oh, thank you so much for sharing that. And showing when I'm really low, and I'll have a post probably today about how I'm feeling this week. I'm not feeling that good. So I don't know, it's weird. I really feel like the more you do it, the less afraid you get of it.
Yeah, like talking about the acne and things like, but just body positivity in general as well. That's another thing where I can imagine is something that can be quite, there can be kind of a hateful kind of vibe to it. And I'm really delighted that, it's not on your side, that you're not receiving that kind of thing, because again, like people worry, everybody worries about how they look. And it's not just about, that's the good thing about your page. It's not just about mental side of things. It's about, health, well-being, all those kind of things come into one. And it's sometimes you kind of think that's a hard thing to balance. I would imagine it's a hard thing to balance, but for some reason you seem to have got it down.
Well, I think it's a lot of practice, and I ebb and flow. So I was really into sort of spirituality and, the universe and the moon and law of attraction and all of that. That was sort of really my thing for a while, but I'm having some time off from that and just embracing that and letting that be as it is. And I'm very open about, okay, I'm not working out at the moment. I'm just doing yoga, or I allow myself to ebb and flow. I am often balanced in the terms of like my physical self. I think I'm quite conscious, health conscious, probably a bit down to my health anxiety, but I've always been a little bit like that. But I'm also quite open when I'm not like that, particularly on my stories, probably more so than my feed, because that's my really niche audience who I connect with quite a lot and feels quite personable, and I feel like they're my friends. So yeah, balanced most of the time, but just through practice, really.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask as well, and this is kind of goes back to kind of dating and things like that. Well, like, and I've always had this thing where when I've started dating someone, and it's okay, when do I mention my mental health? Like, and that's me building it up in my own head, obviously. But it's like, do I mention it, first date? Do I go into, do I wait a month or something? It's difficult now with the podcast because it's a mental health podcast, and people be like, well, the people just don't set them up if they haven't experienced some sort of mental health issue. But when it comes to you, Rebecca, like what like opening up about your past to like potential partners, how do you find that?
So I go in with the approach that I'm not trying to win anything here. I'm not trying to get anything from it. I am just trying to be myself. And if we end up friends, great. If we end up in a relationship, great. If we end up not wanting to see each other again, then that's fine too. I think you have to be in quite a secure point of view to be able to do that. And again, like I said to you, if I'm not at that place in that day, then I won't do it. I'll say, look, not a good day for me. Let's meet another day. And I also have a traffic light system where, because I've got quite a lot of trauma history, and it can be a lot for people to take in at once, even people I'm not, looking at dating. I have sort of a green light, yellow light, red light system where I say to them, listen, I've got a lot of baggage, I'm going to give you my green lights today. And I sort of try and space out over 3 days, because any longer than that, you think, okay, if we're carrying on seeing each other, it's getting a bit serious now.
Yeah.
So I just, I'll drop in all my green lights, and then maybe an amber, and then all my amber lights, and then maybe a red, and then all my red lights. Or at whatever pace sort of works for people, really. Although for me, I do occasionally just think, oh, fuck it, I'll just give them everything straight away, because I'm like, oh, if you can't handle that, this is the story, this is the package, this is what you got to deal with. And I'm not bothered if I am who I am, and I've been through what I've been through. And if people aren't at the place in themselves where they're able to deal with that or get into a relationship with that, then I'm fully understanding and aware of that. I think it takes a lot for someone to be able to cope with all of my stuff.
Yeah. I take stuff away from every episode, and I think the traffic light system is going to be something I'm going to have to use in the future. I'm colorblind, but that won't stop me from. It's only verbally that we're talking about traffic lights, so everything will be okay. I love when people, are very, very passionate about something. And obviously you mentioned yoga. What does yoga do for you?
So yoga for me, I don't do yoga from a fitness point of view. I was really, really heavily into fitness. And I'm sort of getting back into that now. It's been my emotional release. So we store our trauma a lot of the time in our bodies, in our muscles, particularly in our throat. That's why it's often picked up a lot in anxiety, and in our psoas muscle in the hips. And that's because in prehistoric times, the places that we didn't have bones, if we were going to get attacked by a bear, we're most vulnerable. We don't have bones in the throat, we don't have bones in our abdomen. So the trauma would shoot down to the muscles around that, the shoulders, the throat, and the hips as well. So in yoga, we really focus on opening up the chest, opening up the shoulders, stretching the throat, and stretching out the psoas muscle, which is in the hips. And you get a literal emotional release from doing these poses, to the point where it's like, in a way, some weird kind of therapy. And that's sort of where my somatic therapy passion sort of comes in as well, because of how much now I understand about how the body holds trauma.
Actually, what can you explain what somatic therapy is actually?
Yeah, absolutely. So somatic therapy is using the body and sort of how motions and things like that to sort of get things out that have been trapped, emotions, feelings, thoughts, traumas. It's by specific practitioners. So I had a craniosacral therapist who's brilliant, honestly the best. I've had therapy for 10 years, maybe more, 12 years, and the best therapist I've ever had has been somatic. And it's sort of where we will move parts of my body, or she will sort of place hands on parts of my body and manipulate the muscle a little bit, and we'll talk through a trauma that's perhaps being picked up by that muscle, and will relate to where am I feeling pain in the body right now? What's my body language displaying right now? I just, twitched my eye. What could that be symbolizing? And nothing is coincidence. Everything, every motion, every twitch, every sort of pain and ache that we might feel in these sessions is usually a trauma or feeling, something coming up, say, oh, I need to escape, I'm trapped, So that's sort of the basis of it.
And that ties in with yoga for you, that you get the kind of a similar experience from it.
Yeah, absolutely. Except when I'm with the practitioner, it's a lot more beneficial in terms of she talks me through it. She knows where I'm feeling what. She picks up the energy. It's a little bit like Reiki in terms of she is picking up the energy in my body. She's picking up where, it can be a little bit woo-woo if people aren't really into that kind of stuff. But it's worked so well for me. And yeah, I think the difference with yoga is that I'm doing that on my own. So if I'm not in a really let's help myself state of mind, I'm in I really need yoga state of mind, and I'm not in a place where I want to do therapy right there and then. I'm just in a place where I need to release and be like, oh yeah, I needed that sort of thing.
I think I used to be a little bit, well, used to be, no, but when it goes to therapy, I used to be quite cynical, right? And until I started to do some myself and experience different types of therapy and CBT, I've talked about on this podcast a number of times of how important it was for me. But having people come on and talk about therapy that they've been through, I might have heard of it, I might not have heard of it. Were you always open to it, or would you have thought that something like somatic therapy, if you heard about it maybe 10 years ago, you'd be kind of like, what's somatic therapy like?
Absolutely. I was exactly that. I mean, even probably 5 years ago, I wasn't into any of this. I was like, look at all those spiritual weirdos.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, I am the spiritual weirdo, who believes in all of that kind of stuff. So yeah, and I think connecting with my body through the yoga course last year, when I was just sort of going through the anxiety things as well, the timing of it all and how much everybody held me, and my trainer was exceptional in terms of picking up where my emotions were being stored and releasing a lot of that, and sort of seeing it in practice itself and seeing how well it worked, I think was a key part of why I'm so keen on that mode of healing now. It works for me, really well for me.
Absolutely, that's what it's all about. And how do you like, teaching others yoga?
Yeah, it is enjoyable. I think it's challenging in many ways, because you don't know people's abilities until you've seen them. So there's the balance between, I don't want to push you too far, but I don't want you to go away thinking I don't feel anything.
Yeah.
So I'm still sort of navigating that. I think I have done a one-to-one session, which I much prefer. So I'm going to sort of go down that route a bit now. And sort of the end goal for me, really, I am building an app to do with yoga and wellness and things like that. But the end goal is for me to not just be yoga, is to me be yoga, wellness, coaching, spirituality, NLP, CBT, everything basically, because I'm training out to do all of that now, because they're my passions. I've never wanted to be a one career horse. That's never worked for me. Always had lots of things going on, but this time these are lots of things that I'm super passionate about, you know.
I like the kind of constant search for something, you know, the constant that comes across from this conversation I get with you, but whether it's to do with spirituality or creativity, and I can kind of see sides of that, probably more towards creativity for me, but just that kind of need to fill up the time to you know, we talked a bit about taking time off, but at the same time, when all the synapses are, you know, sparking, you need to kind of find things to do, and you're always in search for something. I think that's really great.
Yeah, it's great. It's also, you know, my biggest nemesis at the same time. So today being my official, I don't have to work today day, which doesn't come across very often, because Saturdays is my date day. So to me, that's a job. I'm like, must make the relationship survive.
Yeah.
And then Fridays I do yoga, and the rest of the week I work and waitressing. And then I was like, right, I know my mental health hasn't been great. I need to relax. And I was like, how do I do that? I don't know how to do that.
Yeah, it's
What
difficult.
is fun for me? And my sort of mental stimulation is learning. I love to learn about psychology, psychotherapy, mental health. It's my thing. But in doing that, I am using energy to do that. And that's never going to fill me up. It makes me feel good. It doesn't fill me up. And so I needed to take today to just charge my batteries up again and sit here and do the ironing and watch Netflix and do some knitting.
Yeah, and have a chat with me. I really appreciate it. Like it's great. What actually other therapies that you've been through did you find helped you an awful lot?
So I've had sort of talking therapy, CBT, and everything like that, and they really work for me. I think the slight difficulty is because I've had it for so long and had so many different therapists. I am a little bit, I know what you're going to say, and a little bit like, I've heard this before and we've tried this technique. So which is probably why I sort of need to just stretch out a little bit into different areas and see, oh, let's try something new. But I still do art therapy at home by myself now, which is like my favorite thing to do at home. I might actually have my little sketchbook here.
Oh yeah, brilliant. Yeah.
If I can find it, I keep it under the sofa. So I write a mind map of sort of all my feelings. It's usually when I'm trying to sort of establish how I'm feeling, because I don't know, I've written at the top. So art therapy I use for when I don't know why I'm feeling like a bit weird. And then I write the mind maps, and then I sort of paint or draw.
Oh yeah.
And they don't have to be particularly good. You know, I'm not an artist, but I know how to put my feelings. I did a course on putting your feelings into art, basically. So it's just like, sometimes it's just colours or just sketches, but just help me express myself. And it's therapeutic at the same time as sort of revealing for myself, you know?
Absolutely. We had an art therapist on a long time ago. Joanne was on. She was so good. And it opened up something to me, you know, there's something that I didn't know about. We had a music therapist on, and it's all these kind of things that which were completely alien to me, you know, a few years ago. You know, you're the first person who's actually come on and mentioned the fact that they almost know the playbook of the therapists because they've seen a number of therapists, and I can 100% concur with that. And I've left certain places because of that, because I felt that maybe I wasn't going anywhere because it was the same thing, you know. And I like, do we have to start again? Do you have to ask me for the medication I'm on every time? Is it not my style? It's like, you know, you get so like disillusioned with the whole thing. And you know, and I think that's why the CBT stuck with me, because it was a lot different than the other forms of therapy I was getting. But I think now, after having so many great people on talking about these different types of therapy, I think something like art therapy would be brilliant, because like, I wouldn't be good at art. You know, I never was good at art. But what you just mentioned there, like, it doesn't necessarily have to be great. And it's like throwing something out there. It's like picking up a keyboard if you don't know how to play, and just pressing some keys and just seeing whatever happens.
Absolutely.
You know, I think that's, and again, it shows from your point of view how you are always striving to kind of get better and improve.
Yeah. I don't want myself to get back into the depression hole. I think I think it's probably my biggest fear actually is really getting to that place again, because I know how dark it is there.
And again, that brings its own anxiety, the idea that you're kind of constantly trying to escape something. Like sometimes when you're in a good place, you'll know, Rebecca, when you're in a good place, it's always like what you're trying to go forward towards. But when you are feeling a bit down, like you mentioned you were this week, there's that behind you, and that's when the anxiety comes on. And it's a constant kind of battle of forward and backwards. But what do you like to do? I mean, you probably mentioned all the stuff you like to do in your spare time, but is there anything you haven't mentioned?
I love creating. That sort of, I'm a very creative person. I've started knitting this week. I was doing pottery a couple of weeks ago. I just change my mind all the time. I just, to be honest, my fave thing that I sort of crave to do, but I need the energy to do is studying psychology and psychotherapy. So I'm doing an NLP course at the moment, neuro-linguistic programming, which is just mind-blowingly brilliant. In just terms of understanding people and understanding yourself. And I just love to know more about how, I think because I'm full of such big feelings all the time, any help with any of that just gives me such a buzz. I'm like, oh, there's another way to improve it. There's another way to help me manage it, or help me understand myself, or help me love myself more.
Does spirituality, kind of going back to that, is that something that helps your mental health?
Yeah, so like I said, I'm not as into it as I was, but it's not because I don't believe in it. It's just because I'm not feeling as connected to it as I was. Astrology is something I'm super into. I've got a diploma in astrology.
Oh, wow.
I do sort of birth chart readings for people and things like that. So I love that. I love sort of seeing how the planets react to the world events, really, and how like the collective feels, rather than just looking at my individual chart and being like, oh, this is how I might react. I like seeing like a full moon always like can do things to people. It's when we're at our highest water content, when sexually men are at their most horniest supposedly, and women are at their most fertile if your cycles go that way. It's fascinating to understand the science behind it, because there is science behind it, as much as sort of the skeptics like, no, it's astrology is not a science. It's fine that people feel like that. But yeah, I think it helps me. I do tarot and things like that. Sometimes it is a little bit of gives me a sense of control, which, you could interpret in a negative way, but it's not, I'm not drinking or taking drugs, or, do you know what I mean? It's my little guilty pleasures, and it's my little ways of keeping myself grounded, and it's what works for me. So yeah, I think those definitely. And when I have been in really spiritual points of view in places, that's been my best sort of, probably 2020 again. I was really I was going to stone circles every week and dancing with the moon naked and everything. So that's really when I have felt my strongest, because it makes me feel not alone. I feel like I'm connected to everybody, rather than just in my head.
Well, is that like, for it kind of counts for everything when you say, like, some people will always say something about what it is you like to do. Well, they'll always downplay it, and they'll always, speak about it negatively and stuff. And that's all right. Like, that's completely their own thing. But you're obviously, like I said, pushing forward all the time, and and helping people. I think that's the thing to take away, including myself, when you speak about things that you do. So it's so important, and keep doing it. It was a genuine pleasure chatting to you today, Rebecca.
Thank you, and you.
Thank you. Listen, if you wouldn't mind sticking around for 1 minute, I'll close this out. We'll get a quick photo, and you can go do the ironing, basically. Okay, so I've got a few more people to thank. I want to thank John, obviously, for all his tech advice and all the stuff he does, and to Nathan for the promotion too. My mum, my dad, my granddad, Jaron Calvin, same every time. Subscribe to our YouTube channel if you would. That'd be great. Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Spotify, Apple, Anchor, Google Podcasts. I forgot a question, actually. Rebecca, where can people find you?
At Rebecca Allen with 4 A's in between is my Instagram, and www.RebeccaAllenWellness.com is my webpage. I
mean, we couldn't have promoted it better earlier on, so please go and check Rebecca out. Listen, thanks to everyone for watching today. It was a great chat, Rebecca. Thanks again. Everybody else, have a lovely week, and we'll talk to you next Wednesday. Bye.